There is a particular kind of silence that settles in when the people you raised no longer remember to look back. It crept into Henry Caldwell's life slowly, almost politely, as if asking permission before it stayed. The phone that once rang with birthday plans and Sunday chatter now rested untouched on the small table beside his chair. Holidays arrived and left without a knock at the door. At 68, Henry came to understand a truth he had never prepared for. You can give everything you have and still end up alone. For decades he had lived by duty, double shifts at the mill, scraped knuckles, tired smiles at school recitals, promises kept even when his body begged for rest. He had believed love worked like math, put enough in and something would come back. Then cancer took Martha in the spring, when the trees were blooming as if mocking his grief. The children came to the funeral, spoke gently, hugged him hard, and promised to call. They meant it, he thought, at first. But weeks turned into months, and the apartment filled with echoes of a family that existed only in photographs. One cold evening, Henry stared at his medication lined up like obedient soldiers and realized he was maintaining a body no one needed anymore. That was when he remembered the cabin, his father's old place deep in the Cascades, waiting quietly, forgotten just like him. The drive into the mountains felt like a slow shedding of a life that had already slipped away. Mile by mile, the noise of the city gave up its grip, replaced by winding roads, tall pines, and a sky that seemed larger than any Henry had seen in years. The cabin stood where it always had, weathered and patient, its porch sagging under the weight of time. Inside, it smelled of pine resin and dust, of tools long unused and memories left behind. Henry unpacked little, some clothes, a few books, Martha's recipe box, and the faded photograph he carried everywhere, the four of them smiling at a beach long ago. That first night he sat on the porch and listened. Owls called. Wind moved through branches like breath through lungs. For the first time since Martha died, the tightness in his chest eased. The days that followed were simple and punishing in the best way. He chopped wood until his arms shook, hauled water from the creek, coaxed life back into the old stove. Physical labor dulled the ache of memory. He spoke to Martha sometimes, out loud, telling her about the frost on the windows or the way the stars crowded the sky. He told himself he had come here for peace, but deep down he knew the truth was harsher. He had come here to disappear without making anyone uncomfortable. The morning the forest answered him, Henry was standing on the porch with a mug of coffee warming his hands when he heard it. A low grunt, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of something large moving through brush. His mind jumped to bears, to danger, to the old rules his father had taught him. Then they appeared. A massive sow stepped into view, dark-haired and powerful, followed by four piglets striped like shadows. Wild boars. Dangerous, unpredictable animals that had no business being so close to his cabin. Every instinct told Henry to retreat, but he didn't. He stood there, oddly calm, watching as the sow rooted near his woodpile, her movements purposeful rather than frantic. When she finally left, the ground was torn but nothing was damaged. He forgot about it by afternoon. Wild animals did wild things. That night they returned. This time, the sow climbed the first step of his porch and dropped something at his door before retreating. Chanterelle mushrooms, fresh, golden, the kind Martha used to hunt for in autumn. Henry stared at them for a long time, searching for logic. Coincidence, he told himself. Instinct. But the next morning she came again, leaving a truffle so valuable it made his hands tremble. She looked directly at the window where he stood, as if confirming he had seen. In that moment, something shifted. The forest was no longer silent. It was watching him back. Days passed, and the visits became routine. The boars arrived each morning like clockwork, bringing roots, berries, mushrooms, always leaving them carefully on the porch. Henry began writing everything down in an old journal he found tucked away, as if documenting the events might anchor him to sanity. He named the sow Hazel without quite knowing why. Naming her felt like admitting this was real. He started leaving scraps in return, small offerings that felt less like feeding and more like gratitude. The piglets grew bolder, one with a white patch lingering near his boots while he sat on the porch. He talked to them at first the way a lonely man talks to the weather, then the way he used to talk to his children. About his day, about Martha, about the quiet that still scared him at night. One afternoon, while fixing the roof, the ladder slipped beneath him. Panic surged. Then a sharp squeal cut the air, and Hazel charged forward, bracing the ladder with her massive body. Henry climbed down shaking, staring at her in disbelief. Animals didn't understand accidents. Animals didn't intervene. Yet she had. That night, lying in bed, Henry felt something he hadn't felt since his wife's last breath warmed his hand. He felt needed. The loneliness that had driven him into the woods cracked, just enough to let something else in, something dangerous and wonderful called hope. Winter settled in quietly, and with it came a rhythm Henry never expected. Wake with the dawn, share the morning with Hazel and her piglets, work until his muscles burned in a way that felt honest. He built them a shelter near the cabin, sturdy enough to block snow and wind, and they moved into it as if he had simply finished something that had always been meant for them. His health, fragile as it was, began to steady. The pills worked better when paired with purpose. One afternoon, while splitting wood, pain exploded across his chest, sharp and unforgiving. The world tilted. Hazel was there instantly, shoving him toward the cabin, refusing to let him fall. Henry collapsed inside, fumbling for his medication as his heart rebelled against him. When his breathing finally slowed, he understood what he had never admitted out loud. He had come here to die. The diagnosis had given him permission to give up quietly. The Boers had taken that permission away. Later that day, a young wildlife researcher stumbled onto his trail, curious and observant. She noticed the shelter, the tracks, the impossible patterns. Henry tried to dismiss her questions, but she saw what he was trying to hide. Not just the animals, but the man who had been abandoned and had found a reason to live again. The researcher returned, and this time Henry didn't send her away. He told her the truth about Martha, about the children who stopped calling, about the heart that was failing and the animals who refused to let him fade. She listened without interrupting, tears shining in her eyes as if she recognized the shape of his grief. She spoke about science and empathy, about how what he was witnessing challenged everything people thought they knew. Henry didn't care about that. He cared about one thing, whether telling this story might reach the 3 people who had forgotten him. When the documentary aired, it spread faster than he imagined. Messages poured in from strangers moved by a dying man and the wild creatures who stayed. Henry read every word, his phone finally alive with sound again, though not from the voices he waited for. Days passed. Then finally his phone rang with a familiar number. The conversation was awkward, full of pauses and apologies that came too late to erase the damage, but it came. Henry listened more than he spoke. He realized something then. Reconciliation did not arrive as a miracle. It arrived as a fragile beginning, uncertain and imperfect, much like the bond he had built in the woods. And for the first time, that was enough. Life did not return to what it had been, and Henry did not expect it to. His children called more often now, learning how to show up in small, hesitant ways. He answered with patience he hadn't known he still possessed. The cabin remained his home, the forest his refuge. Hazel and her family stayed close, a constant presence that reminded him daily of the grace he had been given. Some mornings, Henry sat on the porch watching frost melt from the boards, thinking about how narrowly he had missed all of this. The quiet no longer frightened him. It felt earned. When his heart faltered, he rested. When it held steady, he worked. He lived within his limits, grateful for each day that arrived without asking him to justify it. Visitors came and went, drawn by the story, but Henry no longer felt invisible. He had been seen in the deepest part of his life, not by obligation, but by choice. First by animals who owed him nothing, then by people who remembered too late how close they had come to losing him. At night, he spoke to Martha beneath the stars, telling her about the piglets' antics, about the calls from the children, about the strange, beautiful way life had circled back on itself. He told her he was still here. And he meant it. In the end, Henry learned that family is not defined by blood alone, nor by promises made in moments of comfort. It is defined by presence, by who shows up when the weather turns, when the body fails, when the world grows quiet enough to hear your own fear. The wild boars taught him that love does not always arrive in familiar forms. Sometimes it comes on heavy feet, with rough fur and no words at all. Sometimes it stays when everyone else leaves. Henry